Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back in time, far away from the comforts of home, to the world of early explorers. Picture it now. You're standing at the edge of a great wooden ship, a salty wind whipping through your hair, staring out into the vast, endless expanse of ocean before you. The horizon stretches on forever, and behind you, the land you know, your world, grows smaller and smaller. Ahead of you is the unknown, uncharted and filled with mystery, danger, and promise. Sounds exciting, doesn't it? But don't get too comfortable just yet. You probably won't survive this journey without a few "why didn't I think of that" moments. So make sure you're settled in before we begin. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Feel free to share where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Back in the day, the life of an explorer was not quite as glamorous as it may seem today. Sure, we romanticize the brave adventurers setting out to discover new lands. But it was more than just about the promise of glory or fame. It was also about survival, about stepping into the great unknown with nothing but a vague map and a heart full of hope. As the ship creaked and groaned beneath your feet, you couldn't help but feel the excitement of the journey and the deep uncertainty of what lay ahead. You were armed only with basic knowledge of the world, some rudimentary sailing skills, and a ragtag team of sailors, whose idea of adventure was probably closer to sheer desperation than noble curiosity. The sea, as you might have expected, was relentless. For days, weeks, even months, you trudge along, relying on the food stores on board. But those would eventually run out, especially if you didn't manage to find land soon. The salt water seemed endless, and soon, food becomes an even bigger issue. There are no convenience stores on the open ocean. You're stuck with what's on board, and a lot of that is dried. Salted meat, hardtack, basically, hard, stale bread, and whatever fish you can catch along the way. But all that's about to change. You're going to make a discovery, one that will become essential to survival, one that, oddly enough, will involve something you've probably never thought twice about before: seaweed. As you stand there on the deck, staring out at the endless ocean, the world seems to shrink. The days pass by in a blur of waves and wind, and your stomach begins to grumble. The salted meats are long gone. The hardtack has turned to dust, and your thirst has gone beyond unbearable. Your crew is looking to you for leadership, and you're starting to feel the pressure. But then, a strange thing happens. Off in the distance, the lookout spots something that, at first, doesn't seem like much. A dark patch on the surface of the water. At first, it's just a small dot, but as you sail closer, you realize what it is: seaweed. You can't help but smile a little, though it's a tired, weary smile. Seaweed. Who would have thought? But here it is. A lifeline. The crew watches you as you order them to pull the ship closer. You know this might sound strange to anyone who hasn't experienced true hunger at sea. But seaweed is a godsend. It's nutrient-rich and edible, and it could be the difference between life and death. Without it, your men would likely succumb to starvation or the debilitating weakness caused by a lack of vital vitamins. As you lean over the side of the ship and watch the crew pull in bundles of thick, green strands, you realize something. It's not just the seaweed itself, but the way your crew responds to it. They're practically diving into the water, collecting it, and hoisting it aboard with surprising enthusiasm. The seaweed is slippery, difficult to handle, but they are hungry, desperate. You watch them chew on the seaweed like it's the finest feast they've ever had. It's not delicious, not by any stretch of the imagination, but it's something. It's sustenance, and in this world of endless waves, that is worth more than gold. Historians still argue about how crucial seaweed really was to early explorers. Some say it was a lifesaver, while others claim it was more of a psychological crutch than a true food source. What's undeniable, though, is that seaweed helped explorers survive, sometimes for months, in the desolate, open ocean. It became an essential part of their diet and a key to their survival, whether they knew it or not. Now, as you chew on the stringy seaweed, you realize there's more at stake than just hunger. The sailors, pale and listless, are starting to show the signs of scurvy. Their gums are swollen and bleeding, their teeth loosened from their gums. The salty sea air doesn't help, and neither does the lack of fresh fruit and vegetables. You, however, have learned from your experiences. You've read the journals, the accounts of those who came before, and you know that this condition, scurvy, is a killer. Without vitamin C, the body can't properly fight off infections, and the smallest cut could lead to death. You look over at the seaweed again, now that your men are collecting enough to last a few more days. You remember a small detail from one of the accounts you read before setting sail. Seaweed, rich in vitamins, can stave off scurvy. You feel a flicker of hope. The green strands, though bitter, are a crucial part of the cure. You know that, for now. The seaweed is more than just food. It's a healing balm. You instruct your men to eat as much as they can, not just to stave off hunger, but to combat the looming threat of scurvy that threatens to destroy your crew from the inside out. At first, the men are skeptical. How could something so bitter possibly help them? But necessity, as they say, is the mother of invention, and desperation has a way of convincing even the hardest of men. They begin to eat, slowly at first, and then more eagerly. The seaweed's bitter taste may not be pleasant, but the subtle relief in their bodies is enough to keep them going. For the first time in days, they begin to move with a little more energy. It's not much, but it's enough to give you a glimmer of hope. Historians still debate whether early explorers truly understood the connection between vitamin C and scurvy. Some argue they simply stumbled upon seaweed as a solution by chance, while others believe that they were aware of its healing properties all along. Either way, the fact remains that seaweed became a crucial part of the explorers' diet, providing the nutrients they so desperately needed. Without it, many would not have survived the long and perilous journeys that lay ahead. As the days continue to stretch on, the seaweed becomes both a lifeline and a curse. While it provides the necessary vitamins to stave off scurvy, it isn't a miracle cure. You've learned quickly that the seaweed, despite its initial promise, doesn't fully satisfy your hunger or the body's other nutritional needs. The men are beginning to show signs of malnutrition beyond the effects of scurvy, thin, weak, and fatigued. The seaweed, though rich in certain nutrients, lacks the balance of proteins, fats, and sugars required to fuel the body for long, grueling days at sea. The constant chewing on the tough, salty strands of seaweed leaves the sailors' mouths dry, their throats sore, They're sick of the bitterness, but they're still eating it, clinging to the hope that it will get them through the journey. At night, in the dim light of the lanterns, you hear them grumbling, their stomachs still gnawing with hunger despite their best efforts. The seaweed has kept scurvy at bay, but it hasn't filled their bellies in the way they desperately need. You start to question how much longer the crew can continue. It's not just the hunger that threatens their morale. It's the despair. The monotony of the seaweed diet, the lack of variety, the endless stretches of ocean, and the fact that their journey seems to be going nowhere. These factors are wearing them down mentally, more so than physically. The occasional burst of optimism when you spot a potential landmass on the horizon fades quickly as the days stretch into weeks with no land in sight. The lack of fresh food, the relentless cold and damp, the exhaustion, they all take their toll. You're forced to make difficult decisions. How long can you push your crew? How much seaweed can they eat before the bitterness becomes unbearable? How much longer can you survive like this? Historians still argue whether the over-reliance on seaweed was a symptom of desperation or a lack of understanding of balanced nutrition. Some believe that early explorers were aware of the limitations of seaweed, yet used it out of sheer necessity, while others suggest that they simply didn't have the knowledge or the resources to diversify their diet. Either way, what is clear is that the seaweed diet, while a life-saving resource, was far from ideal, and it added a layer of struggle to an already perilous journey. The mind games of isolation. As the days drift into weeks, the isolation starts to play tricks on your mind. You, along with the rest of the crew, have come to the terrifying realization that you're out here, alone in the middle of an endless sea, with only the occasional sight of birds and the distant horizon to break the monotony. The lack of land, the absence of any new landmarks or discoveries, and the exhausting routine of surviving on seaweed begin to take a psychological toll. You had thought you would be stronger, more resilient, but the solitude gnaws at you, eats away at your mental fortitude. The silence of the ocean is deafening. The waves crash rhythmically, day and night. But there's no variation, no change. Even the stars in the night sky appear as distant and unchanging as the sea below. You begin to lose track of time. Was it night or day? The only way to tell is by the subtle shift in temperature and the positioning of the sun. Or, rather, the sun's light when you can see it through the clouds. Some of the crew have started to joke about becoming fish food, and their laughter sounds hollow, forced. It's clear that some are losing hope, their faces hollowed by exhaustion and mental strain. And then there's the smell. It's not just the pungent, salty odor of seaweed or the fishy scent that clings to everything. It's the overpowering musk of human sweat, of bodies crammed together in close quarters with nowhere to bathe. The men have stopped complaining about it. Perhaps they've grown used to it, or maybe they've just given in. Yet every now and then, when the wind shifts just so, you catch a whiff of something else. It's faint, nay, but unmistakable. The smell of decay. One of the sailors falls ill. He starts to cough. Weakly at first, but soon his entire body seems to shake with each hacking fit. The others are scared, unsure if it's just a simple sickness or something far worse. The lack of medicine, the inability to get fresh air, the desperation of their circumstances, all of it starts to compound. You've heard the stories of explorers who died not from starvation or dehydration, but from the ravages of isolation. from the fear of never making it back. Now, you're starting to understand those stories in a way you never thought possible. Historians still debate whether isolation was the most devastating element of these early voyages, or if it was the uncertainty of survival that truly broke the explorers. Some argue that mental exhaustion, paired with physical hunger, led to irrational decisions and eventually to mutinies. Others suggest that the human mind is simply not equipped to handle the kind of sustained isolation that these early explorers faced, and that it was the slow, steady erosion of their sanity that caused their downfall. Either way, the psychological toll of such voyages was as deadly as the sea itself. The seaweed diet: survival or slow death. The more you rely on the seaweed, the more you begin to understand its dual nature. At first, it seems like a miracle. It's edible, it's plentiful, and it's free. The thick green strands provide the only real food, and even though they taste incredibly bland, they're the difference between life and death. You begin to eat it with every meal, sometimes raw, sometimes boiled, depending on what you have the energy to prepare. But as the days stretch on, you start to feel the toll it takes on your body. Seaweed, while rich in nutrients, is also high in salt. And as you keep eating it, your body starts to retain the excess sodium, swelling your limbs, making you feel bloated and sluggish. You drink more water, trying to wash away the salt, but it's never enough. The crew begins to notice the physical changes: hands and feet that puff up, stomachs that churn with discomfort. The bright green color of the seaweed is no longer as appetizing as it once was. What was once a saving grace becomes a reminder of your limited options. The monotony of the diet starts to eat at you, too. You dream of fresh fruits, warm breads, a simple, hearty stew. But these things are far beyond reach. The salted fish, the dried meat, and the seaweed are all that you have. There's no opportunity to hunt, no way to gather anything new from the sea. The crew tries to make things more palatable by boiling the seaweed with the small amount of spices they can find. But it doesn't help much. You are stuck in this loop of survival, eating what you can, when you can. One of the sailors starts to get sick from the diet. His skin turns an unhealthy shade of yellow, and his eyes start to swell. The crew wonders if it's scurvy, or perhaps some other affliction brought on by their constant consumption of the same food. There's no way to know for sure. The absence of fresh food, especially citrus fruits, means that your immune systems are weakening. The vitamins that you would normally get from fruits and vegetables are nowhere to be found. The seaweed is keeping you alive, but it's also slowly deteriorating your health. Historians still argue whether the diet was the true cause of death for many early explorers, or if it was merely a symptom of their overall condition. Some argue that scurvy, a disease caused by a lack of vitamin C, was the primary killer, while others suggest that the lack of fresh food and the constant dependence on seaweed simply compounded the effects of the harsh environment. Whatever the cause, the reality is clear. Surviving on seaweed might keep you alive for a time, but it doesn't guarantee that you'll come out of the experience unscathed. Struggling with scurvy, the curse of the sea. As the days stretch on and the weeks blend together, scurvy begins to claim more of your fellow crew members. At first, it's easy to ignore the subtle signs of the disease. The yellowish tint of skin, the strange tenderness of the gums, and the way the teeth start to loosen. But eventually, it becomes impossible to miss. One of the sailors tries to open a tin of salt beef, but can't even grip the edge of the lid with his swollen, bleeding hands. His once strong fingers are now useless, and the sight of him struggling brings a sharp pang of fear to your stomach. This could happen to any of you. You've heard the stories of scurvy before, but hearing about it is far different from experiencing it. It's not just the weakening of the body, it's the mental toll it takes, too. When the disease sets in, you find that even the simplest of tasks becomes impossible. The muscles ache, the joints swell, and you're constantly fatigued. You can't sleep properly. Your body is so thirsty for nutrients that no matter how much water you drink, you feel parched. The feeling of helplessness grows as you watch your fellow sailors crumble under the effects of scurvy. And you realize that even seaweed, with all its purported benefits, isn't enough to combat this affliction. You try to comfort yourself by reminding yourself that others have survived worse. But even this thought begins to lose its power. You're surrounded by people who have lived with the same meager rations, and yet they're all succumbing in different ways. One man begins to hallucinate, his mind unraveling under the weight of the hunger and the disease. Another sailor's gums become so swollen that his teeth fall out, leaving him in constant pain. The body's slow decline is matched only by the emotional toll it takes on your mind. As the seaweed diet continues to deplete your reserves of vitality, your sense of hope starts to wane. There's no quick fix for scurvy, and even the cruise captain, who once boasted of his knowledge of sailing, seems unsure of what to do. The idea of oranges, limes, and lemons, once so abundant back home, seems like a cruel joke. You think of them as you stare at the dull green water surrounding you, wishing for the smallest spark of freshness. But there's nothing here. Only the endless, monotonous expanse of the ocean. Historians still argue about how long it took early explorers to realize the importance of vitamin C in preventing scurvy. Some suggest that it took decades for anyone to make the connection between citrus fruits and the cure for scurvy, while others argue that sailors knew all along but couldn't find a reliable supply of fresh fruits while at sea. Either way, the realization came too late for many, and the disease claimed the lives of countless explorers who had already made it through the most grueling parts of their journeys. The seaweed solution, a lifeline in desperation. By now, seaweed has become your lifeline, the one thing that might prevent you from sinking deeper into the clutches of scurvy. It's not a miracle cure, but it's all you've got. The crew is in no condition to be picky anymore, and it's clear that survival has become a game of compromise. You begin to notice the subtle, earthy taste of the seaweed, its slimy texture that sticks to your teeth. It's not the most pleasant experience, but each handful is eaten with the hope that it's keeping death at bay. If only for one more day. Some sailors scoop up handfuls of seaweed, chewing it until they're too exhausted to eat anymore. The greens, though not as satisfying as fresh fruit, offer a slight relief. The slight tang of salt seems to awaken something in your mouth, a taste that's vaguely familiar, like the salty air of the coastline. You've become accustomed to the sight of the seaweed now, its strands slipping and sliding in the briny water. At first, you questioned the strange practice, but after several weeks, you've realized that it's better than nothing, far better than waiting for the inevitable to take its toll. You start to wonder if this might be the key to survival. Seaweed is packed with vitamins and minerals, but without a proper source of protein, the effects are slow. It gives you enough energy to carry on, but it doesn't heal. it doesn't reverse the damage already done. For the others, it's a delicate balance, eating enough seaweed to stave off the worst of scurvy, while not overburdening the stomach with too much of a food that was never meant to be the sole sustenance. There's a strange ritual that's formed around the seaweed. The sailors who are still able to move gather it up from the shores, or wade into the water to retrieve it from the depths. Others, too sick to go out themselves, wait by the fire, staring at the smoldering embers as if willing the warmth to enter their bodies. The seaweed is boiled, softened in a cauldron with water, and served in rough bowls, steaming and slimy. Though it has become a welcome meal, even though it isn't much, it's the one thing that keeps you going, day after day. You begin to understand the importance of resourcefulness. How, despite the odds, your fellow explorers have found a way to use what little the ocean provides, even if it's not glamorous. It's a reminder that survival doesn't always come from the most comfortable or enjoyable means. The seaweed, in all its unappetizing glory, is your bridge to the future. And in that moment, you realize something essential about the explorer's resilience. The will to survive is more important than the conditions, more important than the food. You're here. You're alive. And that's what matters. Historians still argue about how many explorers really survived the scurvy outbreak through the use of seaweed. Some believe it was the very lack of fresh fruits that doomed early explorers. And while seaweed provided an essential source of nutrition, it wasn't enough to prevent the disease from decimating large numbers. However, others claim that seaweed may have helped stabilize the condition enough to keep the survivors afloat, literally and figuratively, as they made their way through the endless ocean. The battle for fresh water, a thirst that doesn't quit. As you settle into this rhythm of survival, there's one thing that gnaws at you more than the hunger, more than the constant fatigue from the relentless days at sea, the unyielding thirst. You've been living off rainwater when it's available, but those long stretches of dry days make you realize just how vital fresh water is to your survival. It's an ever-present worry, an anxiety that grows more intense with each passing day. You can't drink salt water, you know that. It only worsens dehydration, and your body will begin to break down if it's not kept in check. But the rain doesn't always come when you need it, and the stores of fresh water on board are running low. You find yourself rationing sips, counting every drop as if it were gold, knowing the next storm might be weeks away. The thirst is maddening. It feels like your body is slowly being drained by the very need that should sustain it. Each time the sun blazes high in the sky, each time the wind picks up, you wonder if you'll make it through the next day. And yet, despite the difficulty, you press on. You begin to get creative with your use of seawater, not to drink, but to rinse, to cool off, to simply relieve your skin from the heat. The salt water stings, but it's better than nothing. You wonder how much longer you can endure this delicate balance. If only there were a more reliable way to store or collect water. Perhaps some invention, some method of converting the brine to drinkable water could make all the difference. But for now, you'll make do with what's available, constantly seeking any sign of moisture. The sailors, too, have begun to talk more about the water supply. Those few who can still talk, the rest, weakened by malnutrition and exhaustion, barely have the strength to contribute. The others, looking frail and haggard, sit near the water casks, hoping that something will come, some miracle, something that will stop the aching thirst that seems to cling to your very bones. You begin to hear stories from the older sailors, those who've survived worse. Stories of collecting water from the dew that settles on the ship in the early morning. Stories of finding hidden sources of fresh water during previous voyages. They recount old techniques, tips passed down from one sailor to the next. But for now, all you can do is wait for a miracle. The thirst consumes more than just the body. It eats away at the mind. You start thinking less clearly. The dull ache in your throat becomes a dull ache in your head. And every creak of the ship sounds like the warning of a coming storm. Historians still argue over how much of the psychological torment of early sea voyages was caused by the lack of fresh water. Some suggest that it was the constant worry about water. The anxiety of never knowing when or where the next supply would come from. That truly broke the spirit of so many explorers. Others believe it was the simple fact that it was impossible to remain physically healthy without fresh water, and without it, the human body began to shut down. For now, the only thing you can do is conserve your energy, hold on for the next rainfall, and pray that you'll find a way out of this dry, desperate world. Navigating by stars, a blind leap of faith. Now that you've grown accustomed to the gnawing hunger and the constant thirst, you face the next great challenge of these early sea voyages: navigation. Picture yourself, once again, out in the open sea, with no land in sight for days, maybe even weeks. The horizon stretches endlessly, an unbroken line of blue, and the sun beats down relentlessly. But what sets this voyage apart is the vast expanse you have to traverse. And the only tools you have to guide you are the stars. At night, you stand on the deck, feeling the cool salt air on your skin as you peer up into the vast sky. It's both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The stars seem so far away, so unreachable, and yet they're your only compass. You've been taught the basics: how to navigate by the constellations, how to track the movement of the stars across the night sky. But even with all that knowledge, the uncertainty is overwhelming. The sea, with its endless expanse, has a way of making you feel small and insignificant, like a speck in an ocean of possibilities. As you squint up at the stars, trying to make sense of the constellations you've learned to rely on, you realize that even with the best tools, you're still sailing blind. There's no roadmap to the unknown, no guide to lead you through the dark abyss. You're relying on your ability to read the stars, on centuries-old knowledge passed down through sailors who have come before you. Every time the sky is obscured by clouds or a storm threatens, you feel that familiar knot of anxiety. What if the stars don't appear? What if you're steering your ship in the wrong direction, away from land, instead of towards it? This reliance on the stars was no mere choice for the early explorers. It was a necessity. Historians still argue about how much early sailors really understood the stars and how much of their navigation was based on superstition or sheer guesswork. Some scholars suggest that sailors relied just as much on their intuition and experience as they did on celestial navigation. Others argue that there was a more scientific understanding, with astrolabes and other instruments used to measure angles and determine position. Whatever the case may have been, you can't help but feel the uncertainty as you scan the sky. In this moment, it's easy to understand why the stars were often viewed as both guides and omens. There's also a certain peacefulness in this method of navigation. Despite the anxiety, the stars, ancient and eternal, seem to connect you to a long line of explorers who braved these same fears. You think of the stories passed down from sailors who navigated by these very same constellations. For them, as for you, the stars were both a lifeline and a reminder of how small you were in the grand scheme of the world. With each passing day, the stars begin to feel like a distant friend, something constant and unchanging in a world that seems to shift with every wave. Still, it's hard to shake the fear that one wrong turn could lead to ruin. But for now, you rely on the stars and the hope that they will lead you to safety. The struggles of self-reliance, life on the water. Now, after days of navigating by stars, there comes another test, the isolation that accompanies such a journey. Even though you're surrounded by your crew, out here on the vast, open ocean, you feel alone. There's no land to anchor you, no familiar faces beyond the ship's weathered wood and the endless expanse of the sea. You are living on the water, each day an unrelenting march towards an uncertain future, with only the barest necessities to keep you going. Take a moment to imagine the constant fatigue. You wake up each morning with a gnawing hunger in your belly, your body weary from long hours of work on deck. The tasks you perform are exhausting, hauling ropes, adjusting sails, manning the rudder. The ship is your home, and you live with the knowledge that its fragile walls are the only thing standing between you and the ocean's vast, unpredictable depths. But your home isn't warm or comfortable. It creaks with every wave, and there's no soft place to rest at night. Just hard, wooden planks that feel like they've been carved out of the sea itself. Despite the hardships, though, you find that there is a kind of rhythm to the life aboard the ship. You settle into routines, finding small comforts in the familiar tasks that fill your day. But nothing can prepare you for the emotional toll of being so far from land. You think of home, of the people you left behind, and a feeling of homesickness starts to creep in. The journey was supposed to be an adventure, a chance to explore the unknown. But as the days drag on, that sense of excitement gives way to something else, an overwhelming desire for something real, something solid to hold on to. You've been told the journey will be worth it. New lands to discover, riches to claim, fame to achieve. But it's hard to stay motivated when the sun beats down relentlessly. The wind never seems to change, and you can taste the salt in the air, day in and day out. Each day feels like an eternity, each wave a reminder of how small and insignificant you are in the face of the world's vastness. And then there's the food. You don't have the luxury of fresh vegetables or fruits, and the meat, salted and hard, is hardly enough to sustain you for long stretches. Every meal is a reminder of just how far removed you are from normal life. It's not just the food that's in short supply, it's everything. Fresh water, warmth, personal space. These are luxuries that have been left behind with the land you sailed from. The psychological strain is just as taxing. You start to feel the absence of routine comforts, being able to speak with someone at length without having to shout over the wind, having a fire to warm your bones at night, or even sleeping in a bed that doesn't rock with every wave. Everything around you seems primitive, raw, and unrelenting. Some sailors try to keep their minds occupied by singing, telling stories, or praying to the gods for a safe voyage. But these distractions only go so far. The constant awareness that your survival depends on the ship, on the wind, on the stars above you, is a weight that grows heavier with each passing day. Historians still debate how much of this emotional strain was common for early explorers, or whether it was a unique experience for certain individuals. Some suggest that the daily grind of life on the ship led to camaraderie among the crew, bonding over shared hardship. Others argue that isolation and monotony led to tension, conflict, and despair among the men on board. One thing is clear, though, the mental strain of such a journey was just as demanding as the physical hardships, and many explorers would not return the same as when they left. The struggle for survival, a delicate balance. You've been at sea for what feels like an eternity now, and the routine of survival begins to feel almost mechanical. Yet, survival isn't just about keeping your body alive. It's about keeping your spirit intact in the face of endless isolation and uncertainty. The constant feeling of hunger, the oppressive heat of the day, the bone-chilling cold of the night. It all weighs on you. And then there's the sea itself, an ever-present force, beautiful yet unforgiving. The small things, like fresh food, become luxuries you can only dream of. Meals are still mostly the same: salted meat, dried fish, hard bread. Fresh water is a constant concern. Every drop must be rationed, and you learn to drink slowly, savoring each sip as if it's the last one you'll ever get. There are no fresh fruits, no greens to balance the diet. Sometimes, the days blur into each other, marked only by the sun's movement across the sky. You become hyper-aware of the rhythm of the world around you. Each wave, each gust of wind. You listen to the creak of the ship's timbers, the snap of the sails in the wind, and you realize that all of it is part of the fragile dance that keeps you alive. As your body endures, your mind wanders. What was once an adventure now feels like an endless test of endurance. Your sense of time fades. There is no day or night, only the relentless march of the sea. You wonder how much longer you can last, how much longer you can endure the monotony of survival. You try to keep your focus on the goal: new lands, riches, glory. But with each passing day, that goal feels more and more distant. The sea has a way of making everything feel out of reach, like a tantalizing mirage that evaporates the closer you get. It's easy to imagine that, at some point, you begin to question whether it's all worth it. The psychological toll of such a long, uncertain journey starts to eat away at you. You're surrounded by men who share your fate, yet you're more alone than ever. The isolation of being so far from home, from everything familiar, is something that can't be easily explained. The once bustling port towns, the markets full of fresh produce, the chatter of fellow townsfolk, all of it seems like a distant memory. Now, the crew is all you have. And while there are moments of camaraderie, the weight of the journey is heavy on every man's shoulders. Historians still debate how the explorers kept their morale up during such grueling expeditions. Some argue that the crew relied on their shared sense of duty to push forward, while others suggest that superstition and fear of failure drove them. Tales of treasure, new worlds, and a glorious return home may have served as a powerful motivator. But it's hard to ignore the toll such an expedition would take on a person's mental state. Some explorers might have found a sense of purpose in the journey, while others may have succumbed to despair. And yet, there's something awe-inspiring about the fact that, despite all the hardships, despite the hunger and the exhaustion, these explorers kept going. They were driven by something deeper than mere survival. They were driven by a vision of the unknown, the hope of discovery, the thirst for something more than the life they left behind. Discovery and the moment of landfall. The days blur together as you trudge on, but then something shifts in the air. The tension in the crew is palpable. There's a new energy, a buzz of excitement mixed with a touch of anxiety. You've reached a critical point in your journey. The landscape of the open sea, once endless and intimidating, now begins to show signs of something more. The air is different, fresher, tinged with the scent of salt water, earth, and the promise of new horizons. You've been navigating by the stars, watching the winds, keeping track of the currents. But nothing compares to the feeling of possibility in the air when you sense land is near. The prospect of solid ground, of relief from the endless waves, sparks something primal within the crew. The conversation picks up, laughter and anxious chatter filling the air as everyone talks about what they'll find when they reach land. Some dream of riches, others of rest. But no matter what, you're all united by a singular, overwhelming feeling, the thrill of discovery. You can barely contain your excitement as the lookout calls out the first sighting of land, a tiny speck on the horizon. The joy that surges through you is like nothing you've ever experienced before. After all the hardship, all the uncertainty, you're finally on the brink of reaching something that might just make it all worth it. The sails catch the wind more eagerly now, the ship cutting through the waves as you race toward the shore. You wonder what this land will be like. Will it be inhabited? What resources will it offer? The possibilities feel endless. And for the first time in ages, you dare to imagine what lies ahead. The crew starts to prepare. The excitement is contagious. But there's also a sense of caution. You know that reaching land is not the end of the struggle, but merely the beginning of another. What if the land isn't as welcoming as you hope? What if it's already inhabited by others? There's no going back now. And no matter what, you'll face whatever comes next. As the ship nears the shore, the view becomes clearer. You catch glimpses of the coastline, rugged and wild, with dense forests and mountains looming in the distance. The sunlight shimmers off the water, casting long, golden rays across the land, and the feeling of excitement becomes overwhelming. You stand at the edge of the ship, heart pounding in your chest, knowing that soon you'll be stepping foot on land. Land that, to you, holds the promise of a new world. Historians still debate how the explorers felt during those moments of landfall. Was it the sense of triumph, the culmination of years of planning and perilous journeying? Or was it the nervous anticipation of the unknown? The fear of what they would find when they reached land? Some explorers would have celebrated with exuberance, others with solemn reflection. But one thing is certain. Those who first sighted land felt the weight of their survival, their daring, and their future. And then, as the ship anchors in the bay, the real work begins. You're no longer drifting in uncertainty. You've reached the threshold of something great. The rest of your journey has yet to unfold. But for now, you stand at the edge of discovery, and in that moment, everything else fades away. The first step on new soil. The ship's anchor drops with a satisfying thud, and the crew rushes to prepare for the moment of landfall. You can hear the bustle of activity, the sharp command of officers, the creaking of wooden planks, and the swift movement of sailors getting their gear together. There's a restless energy in the air, a cocktail of fear, excitement, and the raw uncertainty of what awaits. The sea that has been your home for so long now feels like a world you're leaving behind. And the land ahead feels like both salvation and unknown peril. As you descend from the ship, your boots hit the wet sand. The feeling of solid ground beneath your feet is surreal. For months, your world has been nothing but the endless rhythm of waves. And now, here you are, standing on a place that is not only foreign, but unknown. You squint up at the bright sun, which casts long shadows across the shore, its rays warming your skin, a reminder of the outside world you have been cut off from for so long. The earth is firm beneath you, but there's an unease, a slight tremor of doubt. This land might have been discovered by others before you, or it might be entirely untouched. There's no way to know for sure, and that uncertainty churns in your gut like a storm ready to break. The crew members start to gather around, some kneeling to touch the soil, others shouting words of triumph or relief. You can hear the first few steps into the jungle-like forest beyond the beach, the rustling of leaves and the snapping of branches. The air smells different here, fresh, earthy, with the scent of salt still lingering. You take a deep breath, trying to savor the moment, but the weight of what's to come presses heavily on your chest. The forest looms ahead, dense and thick with unfamiliar trees. Vines snake through the air, and tall, towering trunks block much of the sunlight, casting long shadows over the land. It's not the lush paradise you might have imagined, but a wild and untamed place. You wonder if the crew will be able to navigate it, and what creatures might lurk in the underbrush. What dangers will you face on land that, just a few hours ago, was a distant promise on the horizon? The moment you step into the forest, everything changes. The sounds of the beach fade away as the dense trees and undergrowth swallow the noise. The sun, now hidden behind the canopy of leaves, makes it hard to see clearly. You pull out your sword, as a few cautious steps bring you deeper into the shadows, the unknown pressing in from all sides. Your heart pounds, your every sense heightened by the unfamiliarity of this place. The sense of awe and adventure is still present, but now you feel the weight of your mission. This is no longer just about discovery, it's about survival. Historians still argue about how the first explorers felt as they stepped onto the land. Was it joy and victory? Or was it the terror of the unknown? A gnawing sense of vulnerability that came with being the first to step into a land no one had known before. Some believe the first landfall was full of celebration, while others say it was filled with dread, knowing that this was no simple victory, but a prelude to years of hardship. For you, standing at the edge of this new land, there's a strange sensation. This place might be a new beginning, but it also feels like the start of something far more complex and dangerous. And as you continue deeper into the forest, there's no going back. The future ahead is uncertain, but you've crossed the threshold, and there's no turning around now. The struggle for survival. The landscape stretches endlessly before you, wild, untouched, and unforgiving. The dense jungle presses in, with every step a struggle against the heavy undergrowth, the thick vines, and the suffocating humidity that clings to your skin. As you and your fellow explorers make your way deeper into the unknown land, the reality of survival sets in. It's not just the exhaustion of the long journey that weighs on you. but the constant need to adapt, to learn how to survive in a world where every plant, every animal, and every river could be a new danger or a potential resource. Food is a constant concern. The rations you brought with you are already running low, and the seaweed you harvested on the ship is long gone. You're forced to rely on the unfamiliar environment to provide for you. The jungle, though rich in life, is also teeming with potential threats. Some of the plants you encounter seem edible, their leaves lush and green. But the majority are poisonous. A mistake could cost you dearly. You turn to the indigenous plants that might offer sustenance, much like the seaweed you survived on during the voyage. But now it's a different kind of challenge. Every plant has a hidden danger, and you're forced to use trial and error, often with very little guidance. You might stumble upon something that looks promising, only to find that it has a bitter, numbing taste, or worse, makes your stomach churn with discomfort. As you continue, you're reminded of the ever-present reality of your situation. You're isolated, cut off from everything you've known. The air smells damp, the heavy humidity almost suffocating. You can feel the sweat beading on your forehead, but you don't dare stop to wipe it away. The jungle feels alive, and with each new step, it feels as if the very earth itself is watching, waiting to see if you'll succeed or succumb. And yet, in this relentless heat and under the weight of the unknown, you can't help but feel a strange sense of awe. The land, in all its dangerous beauty, is a reminder of the fragility of human existence, of how quickly the line between survival and disaster can blur. The first few nights are the hardest. There's no soft bed to sleep in, no warm meal to fill your stomach. Instead, you huddle around a campfire, the crackling flames casting flickering shadows on the surrounding trees. The sound of the fire popping and crackling fills the silence, but it's a comforting noise amidst the stillness of the jungle. You lay awake, listening to the rustling of the trees and the occasional howls of distant animals, wondering what creatures might be watching you, waiting to strike. Despite the fire, the cold of the night air is biting, and your clothes offer little protection. You wrap yourself in your cloak, pulling it tight against your body, but sleep doesn't come easily. Historians still debate whether early explorers truly understood the danger they faced when they first arrived in these new lands. Was the struggle for survival simply a product of their lack of experience? Or was it the result of the unknown environment pushing back against human intrusion? Some suggest that the early explorers were so consumed by the thrill of discovery that they failed to realize just how much they were pushing their limits, while others argue that it was the very nature of the land they entered that was both a treasure trove and a relentless adversary. The days pass slowly, with little to mark the difference between one and the next. You feel the strain on your body, the sharp hunger in your stomach, and the heaviness of your eyelids as you struggle to stay awake. But through it all, there's a small flicker of hope that keeps you moving forward. The thought that, somehow, you will make it through this. That the struggle will one day pay off. You don't know what that will look like yet, but you know that, right now, survival is your only goal. And as you press onward through the wilderness, you realize that you're no longer just an explorer. You're a survivor. The silent struggle. The jungle is full of contradictions. On one hand, it's teeming with life, lush, vibrant greenery that seems to stretch endlessly in all directions. The hum of insects buzzing in the thick air, the occasional screech of a bird overhead. on the other hand, the landscape is a constant reminder of just how difficult survival is in this foreign land. Every step feels heavier, each breath more labored than the last as the heat presses in from all sides. The constant buzzing of the bugs is a maddening soundtrack to your daily existence, and there's no escaping the feeling of being watched, as if the dense foliage itself is observing your every move. Your skin is a patchwork of insect bites, some swollen and red, others oozing and itching terribly. The worst part is that there's no respite. Daylight gives way to darkness, and the suffocating humidity doesn't ease. It's as if the air itself has weight, pressing down on you, making it hard to think, let alone move. The days blend into one another, each one a blur of searching for food, avoiding danger, and hoping that, just maybe, today will be the day you find something edible. But despite the overwhelming odds, you can't help but admire the resilience of the land. The towering trees, their barks scarred and rough, stretch upward, reaching toward the sky in silent defiance of the hardship that surrounds them. The vines twist and curl around the trunks, growing ever higher, ever stronger, despite the constant threat of predators. There's a lesson to be learned from the forest: adaptation. The land changes with every passing moment, and you must change with it or perish. As you and your group continue through the jungle, your thoughts turn to the seaweed that once saved you. That simple yet vital resource that allowed you to survive the first leg of your journey. The taste of it is still fresh in your mind, slimy, salty, and barely enough to keep you going. You remember the feeling of relief when you first discovered it, that flicker of hope that things would be okay. But here, in the jungle, things are different. You can't rely on the seaweed now. You're far from the coast, deep into unknown territory, and finding food has become an even greater challenge. The jungle, with its tangled underbrush and unpredictable terrain, offers no guarantees. You stop for a moment, sweat pouring down your face, and look around at the land. The foliage is thick, the air is heavy, and your body aches from the relentless exertion. And yet, despite the challenges, there's something captivating about the scene. The sense of adventure, the sheer willpower to survive, fills you with a quiet resolve. You can almost taste the feeling of triumph. If you make it through this, you'll have proven something, not just to the world, but to yourself. Historians still argue whether the early explorers were truly prepared for the harsh realities of the lands they encountered. Did they understand the extent of the hardships they would face? Or were they simply driven by the allure of discovery, unaware of the toll it would take? Some scholars argue that the explorers were so consumed by their dreams of fame and fortune that they overlooked the practical difficulties of survival. Others suggest that, in many ways, the explorers' naivety was the true challenge. They were so focused on the promise of riches and glory that they failed to prepare adequately for the trials ahead. Regardless of the reasons, the reality of their journey was a sobering one. As you continue on, your mind drifts back to the survival instincts that have kicked in: the search for food, water, and shelter. Every movement feels calculated, every step a conscious effort to avoid danger. You've learned quickly that survival is not about strength alone. It's about resilience, resourcefulness, and the ability to adapt to the world around you. You take another step, eyes scanning the landscape for anything that might offer sustenance. The journey continues, relentless and unforgiving. But somehow, you find the strength to keep going.